Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Topical Talkology.
Good morning.
Good morning. So, the immigration has reared its ugly little head in the media again this week, particularly what's happening with the States about the separation of children from migrant families, although that's been going on for years. Angela Merkel has lost potentially most of her power again due to immigration. And if we go back even further, Brexit, the reason for Brexit was the main cause because of immigration. The new Italian government is because of the cause of immigration. So Austria again is another result of immigration. So the thing is, why is Europe or the world not giving it enough? Why are they ignoring what people want? Because ultimately politicians in some ways are there to represent the people that, and people's views and people's values and what people want. Yet at the moment everyone seems to be ignoring that, and they've just got their own little private agenda.
Well, two immediate reasons spring to mind. The first is the bigger political game that Germany and France are playing, and the second thing is political correctness.
So it basically comes down to liberalism in some ways, doesn't it?
Well, two things.
Too much liberalism.
The first is the end game of the powers that be, which is to dilute Europe into some kind of nameless federal state or identityless federal state. And the second, which comes from that, is the excessive political correctness of the left.
So say that again.
And the second that comes from that is the excessive political correctness of the far left, extreme left.
And it's becoming. I'm becoming fascinating watching this, because actually I was discussing with my daughter the other day. Because someone would have accused someone. He was a liberal politician, liberal Democrat politician in the UK, and I remember he actually said to me a little while back. He says, "If you're American, you'll be a Republican," and chances are I probably would be in many of their aspects. Of course, there is some overlap. And my daughter said, "Oh no, I'll be a Democrat." And the thing is, it's not that my daughter holds identical views to me, but there's more Republican tendencies in her, or right-wing conservatism in her, than she actually cares to want to admit. And the reason is because the marketplace or the world or the political spectrum is identifying that actually to be nice and to be kind is to actually be liberal and to be democratic, as opposed to being a hard-nosed pragmatist conservative. Now, here's the problem. I haven't got, and you brought this up a few months ago when we were arguing about passion, and I said you've got to have passion so you can actually stay in for the long run, because if you don't have passion, you can't really immerse yourself into actually what you actually want to change. But the problem is, the worst thing about going in the wrong direction is about going in the wrong direction enthusiastically. And if you've got too much passion, it overclouds the logical pragmatism about what you actually need to change. And you can't see it, because obviously emotion is actually stronger than will, or stronger than, emotion's high, intelligence low, because obviously the amygdala overpowers the logical thinking part.
Hijacks your logic.
So known as the amygdala hijack. But the problem is that you need a balance of both. And I'm not naive enough to think that you've got to be pragmatic about everything, because we are human, and humans do have feelings, we do have emotions, and there's a moral code that we do need to be able to undertake. Yet it seems to be too much one way and not enough of the other. Do we find the balance? Is it possible to find the balance, or is it too late?
Well, the balance comes from leadership. And the way that democracy is set up, it's impossible to provide leadership, because the leaders of democracy are beholden to the masses, and the masses with the voice at the moment are the far left.
Now, are they?
Because that's political correctness.
Are they the voices? Because the thing is that it's not that there's the mass voices; it just seems to be the loudest voices. Because the thing is, you look at someone like California, which has got very much, they believe in this open border policy. They believe in
Don't forget those that
they're happy with their illegal immigration. Yeah, they're now the poorest state, and if that is, and if that policy or that belief is so good, why is California floundering as a country? I mean, their education is bad, their economy's gone down. In fact, many of the large companies are saying, actually, we don't want to stay here anymore, and they're moving to states like Texas, which are now going to flourish even further. Because people, there seems to be from the left, as soon as you're born, you've got a right to look after me. Whereas I believe conservative thinking is, actually, you have the power to be able to actually decide your own destiny and how you want to choose to live your life, and you've got to take responsibility for that.
California is an example of the destructive effect of political correctness, in other words, isn't it?
It is, because the thing is, I mean, and I believe that. Everyone's got the power. Parents got the power to be able to teach the kids how to look after themselves. Animals teach the young in the wild. Its purpose is to actually make them survive, to actually be able to go and feed, how to hunt, how to look after themselves.
There is one theory. You mentioned your daughter wanted to be nice and kind.
Well, no, that's because you can still be nice and kind and still be.
What's another word for nice and kind? Think Jordan Peterson.
No. Go on. I'm not going.
Agreeable.
Agreeable. Okay.
Okay, and he discussed a study that they did, and the study was: does political correctness exist? And the answer is yes, it does. Then they looked through multivariate analysis as to what was associated with political correctness, and they came up with two things: feminine and extreme leftism. That was what they came up with. And so he said one theory is that the rise of females in politics has led to excessive liberalism and political correctness.
I think we've also got to accept that times evolved since the suffragettes. I mean, I think they're in their 100 years this year, actually, since they got the vote. However, I think they're perfectly entitled. They contribute to society, and I think anyone who contributes to society should actually get a say in how to do it. But this is where they take feminism too far. It's like they take the Me Too campaign too far. Everything that goes to extreme, it goes push hard the other way, and then people actually start pushing back. And that's what happened. I mean, we talked about Tommy Robinson, and we talked about people are pushing back. People feel that they are losing their identity. And we talked about, one of the things we talked about before this, is we talked about one of the biggest problems with Angela Merkel. She let so many people in so soon that it was too much of a change. Now, it's human nature that people follow patterns, right? So you create, governments have created a system. We follow that system. We get used to that system. Now, had they drip-fed immigration in a small amount of quantities, people wouldn't have really noticed. But they did it in such a huge way. And it's like, and I use the analogy of chemistry. Or even a recipe when you're actually cooking. If you actually change the ingredient, you put a bit of salt into the food over and over again, and you do it slowly, you won't always notice. But if you actually put a great big fist of salt into a meal, it changes the whole taste of the food.
Well,
and same with chemistry.
There's two main psychological mechanisms at work there. One is based on research of a gentleman who looked at what causes authoritarianism bottom up. In other words, what causes people to group together and reject anything that's different. In other words, reject foreigners. And this is bottom up, not top down. So it's irrespective of leaders, and that is acute threat. An acute threat acute serious threat. So it can come in the form of plague. It can come in the form of war. Although
and famine. That's Maslow's theory, though, isn't it?
Famine, yes. But it has to be serious famine. If it's gradual malnutrition, then it doesn't work. So it has to be very acute. If there's a gradual drip feed of the threat, then people tend to get used to it.
That's correct.
And the other thing, of course, is what we've talked about many times before, which is mirror neurons. And research shows that if you look at someone who you identify with, then your mirror neurons fire away quite nicely, and you're more likely to want to produce oxytocin and to interact with them in a peaceful manner. If, on the other hand, you don't relate to someone if they are of a different colour, for instance. And they've done research on that. They've looked at white people looking at white people doing stuff and their mirror neurons fire away happily. They've looked at white people looking at non-white people and their mirror neurons either don't fire at all or fire much more slowly.
But here's the thing, over history or over many years, probably the last 50 years, I suppose, or 100 years, we've seen immigrants actually sort of emerge themselves into newer countries, and they've adapted pretty well. But they've done that without affecting the identity of each individual country. Now, I believe in diversity, but I also believe in diversity that every country should actually have its own identity.
See, they're actually assimilated. This is the point. So immigrants before, people who came here in the 60s and 70s would call themselves British. A lot of them. I mean, obviously there's exceptions, but they'd be proud to call themselves British. But that certainly isn't the case now, and people don't assimilate.
No, and there's a huge amount of anger and animosity towards white people, and I'm not. I'm half Latin. I'm half British. So.
Jewish. Jewish.
I'm not Jewish at all. I went to Catholic school, you know that. Well, but what I'm saying is, I was at the House of Commons probably about a couple of weeks ago, and it was to do with the young vote. And the thing is, the debate wasn't nothing about the young vote. It became about racism. It became about one person brought up the fact that when Britain went into actually India, there was a whole thing about them siphoning trillions of pounds. I don't know where they got their statistics from. Trillions of pounds from India. And but it made me actually go and do a little bit of research on the back of that, and they're saying, well, at that point in time, all countries were colonizing, all countries were going to, were looking to actually overtake other countries, and we talked about how even in the indigenous people of America, tribes would actually take each other's tribes' lands. So it's always gone on in those days. Now we've evolved. We're a little bit more. How can I put it? We're better behaved than that. But the thing is, people are asking for Britain today, for example, to apologise for what happened back then. I'm thinking, why should they be apologising for that?
Because they're not the people now, but they were then.
And here's the thing, because people aren't taking accountability. I think they're taking. I mean, look, slavery in any form is wrong. I don't agree with it. I think it's one of the things I actually hate. Yet,
but
the same people.
Slavery is actually just cheap labour.
It is cheap. Well, no, it's not that, because when you're actually putting someone in chains, it doesn't work like that. But here's the thing: they're blaming it on white people as such, as that was slavery was the thing that was created.
All great civilizations are based on slavery.
It happened in Egypt. You had the Barbary pilots from the Ottoman Empire who actually enslaved many of the Europeans. The people from Morocco and Libya or Tripoli. The proper civilizations, the great civilizations, which are based on slavery, also tended to treat the slaves very well. Actually, they had their rights, they had their standard of living, far better actually than immigrants coming to the UK now and working at below minimum wage illegally. I accept that, but the thing is, it's about choice. Now, we've discussed choice, but the thing is, people should still actually have a choice of how they actually want to live. That way, they can take responsibility for their own lives, and I firmly believe that.
But they don't have the choice. Immigrants in this country, and in fact around the world now, people don't have a choice anymore.
Why not?
Because they economically they can't fit in.
There's many people who pull themselves up from the bootstraps.
But the average person can't do that. The average person is stuck with a dead-end minimum wage job in a country they can't afford even half decent accommodation. And so you'll see these immigrants walking around, they'll be sleeping 10 to a room, they won't be able to sleep properly, they're chronically sleep deprived and unhealthy and looking miserable, working on the black markets and not even contributing to the economy.
That's how you have to start.
But they usually finish that way as well.
When I first moved in with my wife and we were married, we lived in a one-bedroom in a bedroom in someone's house until you actually build up and you move forward.
You couldn't do that now. You realise you couldn't do that now. I couldn't afford. When I started as a junior doctor, and bear in mind we're not giving advice as licensed medical practitioners, when I started life as junior doctor, I actually bought a one-bedroom flat in St John's Wood, and the mortgage was quite a weight on me, but I could do it. Now, I'd have to have finished my training and be working as a consultant to be able to afford the same flat. It's become ludicrous, and the reason it's